Cillin, thank you so much and welcome once again to South Africa.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for such a very kind introduction. My goodness, if only my mother were able to hear that. Hey, listen, folks, thanks a million for getting up so early in the morning. It's just as well that we don't have our cameras on. Some of you are probably still in your onesies or your pajamas, or if we're lucky, you're in your pajamas. But it's evening time over here. It's coming up, it's about 20 to 6 in the evening over here. So today we're here to talk about feedback and how do we actually go about doing that, because it's one of those things that is often done incorrectly, and it can have quite an impact on the person who receives that feedback, even unintentionally by the giver of the feedback, if we do it in the wrong way or are not aware of some of the things that might be going on for that person and how they process the feedback. So really I wanted to give you a bit of a framework to work through. And if you work through this framework, you really are going to increase your chances of really nailing that feedback to the point where the person takes it on and it's useful to the person, and we do start to see those changes. So one of the biggest problems with delivering feedback is we're never really taught how to do it. How we have learned to give feedback is how feedback has been given to us over the years, whether rightly or wrongly. And that's why people might hate giving feedback and hate receiving it, because it's painful for both parties. In fact, the truth is, in order to accept feedback and even to be able to give feedback, both parties need to be just a little bit vulnerable. Because if I'm receiving feedback on, my presentation style, for example, then I'm opening myself up for correction, and I might even think, hey, I'm the best presenter in the world, and now I need to get feedback. So there's a little bit of vulnerability there. I'm exposing myself to that, but also for the person giving the feedback, because a person giving me feedback doesn't know how I'm going to react. So it does take that courage to be able to step into that space and give open and honest feedback. And how we do that is really, really important. So when it comes to giving feedback, there are three phases. This is how I like to break it down. The first one is preparation. We have got to be prepared, because feedback is such an important aspect of any manager or any leader in giving his or her team. Absolutely essential for people's growth. And unfortunately, it's not one of those things that we ever prepare for. We just kind of give it out. We might have a few points written down, but in formulating that feedback, it's something that we never really take time for. And of course, that's the next step, is the formulation of the feedback and taking time to do it. Sometimes it only will take about 5 minutes to pull that together, but without that, it can go drastically wrong. And the last part is the exchange. And rather than calling it an execution or a delivery of the feedback, it's called exchange, because the other person is part of it as well. And we want to bring them, we want to invite them into the conversation as well, because no matter how thinly you slice things, there are always two sides to the story. So we want to hear their sides to the story. It's not a case of me just giving it to you and you have to accept it. It's a case of me sharing my thoughts and then hearing your thoughts as well, and then arriving at the best way forward ultimately. So when it comes to the preparation side of things, there's a few things we need to be considering. Basically, when is the right time for giving feedback? When is the wrong time for giving feedback? So the right times are, sometimes it can be straight after the event when you're prepared and ready to go. So if all you need is about a minute or two, then straight away is really, really good. Another right time is during one-on-one meetings or end-of-year reviews or quarterly reviews or times like that. When not to give feedback, when you're not prepared. Sometimes people will ask you for feedback on something, and if you're not prepared, it can go terribly wrong. And one reason that a person might ask you for feedback about something, say, for example, they're facilitating a meeting and they ask you for feedback about that, they might feel themselves that they didn't do a great job. And really what they're looking for is a bit of a boost to say, hey, yeah, no, you did perfectly fine, versus the, well, you could have done this better, you could have done that better, you could have done that better. So be mindful about the purpose or really what it is that the person is asking for when they ask for feedback. If someone asks you for feedback and you're not prepared, then just let them know, hey, can I have a couple of minutes? Oh, here's my cup of tea. Oh, look, and it's in my South Africa cup. I've been to South Africa. I ran a marathon over there. And would you believe that I couldn't finish it? Because these elephants ran onto the track, I swear to God. About 1,500 meters from the end, elephants kind of stormed the track and they wouldn't move and the whole thing was called off. I was absolutely gutted. So I've never completed a marathon. Anyway, sorry, back to the feedback. So when not to give feedback is another time is when the person might be having personal or challenging problems. So where their mood might affect them hearing more feedback. And also for ourselves, where our mood might affect giving them feedback. So being aware of our state or how we're feeling emotionally, or any bias that we might have towards that person can interfere with the feedback. So we've really got to be mindful of where we're at, and we need to be in a good space. Because what if the person challenges you or throws the feedback in your face? How are you going to respond? If you're already emotionally triggered, or you have an unconscious or even a conscious bias against that person, it could go horribly, horribly wrong. So when considering the preparation, I like to break it down into 4 different areas. Firstly, it's if you need to give someone feedback, what is the outcome that you want? So in a lot of cases, we're looking for a change in behavior or them to do something differently or better the next time around. Now, that's always a good outcome to have. But there's another outcome that I think is just as important that people often forget about. And that is to ensure that they receive the message within the intention that it is delivered, and also about maintaining or improving our relationship. So when we look at these 2 things, relationship and message, they can interfere with one another. So if we look at it as a graph, for example, something like this, and down here is the message and up here is the relationship, right? And down here is low and up here is high and out here is high and that type of thing. So if, for example, the relationship is too important, is really, really important to me, what I might do is I might play in this area here where the relationship is high, therefore it dilutes the importance of the message. So I give the person the feedback, but I diluted so much that the person, they kind of walk out of the meeting going, I think I'm doing a good job. I'm not really sure. That's because I didn't want to rock the boat or damage that relationship because it's too high. Now on the flip side, down here in this corner, where I don't care about the relationship, and this person is going to hear the message whether they like it or not, and I can give that message pretty bluntly, right? And those kind of messages, that kind of feedback is probably going to impact on the person and make them feel bad about themselves as well, which we don't want to do. I mean, it's really easy to do that, right? But we don't want to do that. So an outcome, a successful outcome, I'm always looking for when giving feedback, and even having a difficult or a crucial conversation, is to ensure that the message is high, but also the relationship is high as well. So I'm playing in this space here. So I always ask myself, how can I ensure that the person feels comfortable even at the end of the feedback session? They might not necessarily feel comfortable during it, but it's important that they hear this message. And I'm very mindful about how I deliver that, because the relationship is equally important. And of course, the ultimate goal is that they take the feedback and they apply it, and we start to see some changes there. The next part of it is the action place. So if I want to achieve this outcome, what are the things I need to prepare for? What are the things I need to do? And getting myself in my own state, a good state, is one of those things. Practicing the delivery of the message, writing it out, and even selecting the right delivery style. So we're going to talk today. I'm going to share with you 6 or 7 different ways of giving feedback depending on the situation. So rather than just going to the old, the feedback sandwich, where they talk about commend, recommend, command, right? Now that's a perfectly good way of giving feedback. The problem with that style is that it can become quite predictable if I use it more than once or twice, and people hear it coming, right? So, you know, I might say something along the lines of, you know, Cillin, I think I really like the way you delivered that document. And I'm thinking, oh, hang on a second, this sounds familiar. Ah, here it comes. But it was too short, or didn't quite get to the message quick enough, or whatever it might be. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, so that's really what the person wanted to tell me. And then I'm not listening to the second command when they say, but overall, you know, it was a good start. No, we need to change it. I'm not listening to that. I'm not hearing it. So as soon as I hear the first compliment or commend, I'm already preparing myself for the recommend piece. I'm already preparing myself for that meat and that sandwich. So it becomes a bit predictable, really. So we're going to talk about loads of different ways of giving feedback so it sticks, and it's less predictable, and it's more conversational. That's really where we want to get to. So if I think to myself, okay, in order to achieve that outcome, what do I need to prepare for? I also need to consider potential obstacles. So I need to ask myself, how is this person going to receive this? And if they take it badly, how am I going to respond? You know, what could they push back with? Or have I given this person feedback in the past and it's gone terribly wrong? How can I ensure that that doesn't happen this time? So what are the potential obstacles that might get in the way? And of course, the last thing, once we think about the obstacles, what are those solutions? What are those things I can prepare for? So let's break it down again. So in preparation, we need to be talking about the outcome. We need to talk about the action to achieve that outcome. What are the things I need to do? We need to be mindful of the obstacles. So just list them basically. And then what are the solutions for overcoming those obstacles? And again, in terms of preparation, we need to be reminding ourselves when is the right time for giving feedback, when is the wrong time for giving feedback. So far, so good. If it's all good, just give me a few thumbs up there. Those little reactions buttons are really, really useful. I'm talking to myself here. I love the thumbs up. Thank you, folks. That's fantastic. Okay, so we talked about the preparation phase. Now let's talk about the formulation phase. So earlier I talked about, you know, the command, recommend, command, so the feedback sandwich. And that's a perfectly good and valid way of giving feedback. As I mentioned before, using it too often can become predictable, and people just kind of, they zone out of the good stuff and zone in on the corrective stuff. And of course, we want them to hear both. So how I like to phrase these things, another way of giving feedback is what I call the you choose approach. So the you choose approach, it goes along the lines, and this is how I phrase it. I'd say, hey, Cillin, you know, there's some really good feedback that I know you're going to want to hear. And I've also got some corrective stuff that I know is going to be useful for you in the future. Which would you like to hear first? Now, 9 times out of 10, people are going to go for that corrective stuff first. You know, so I was like, they'll say, give me the bad feedback. And I'll say, whoa, there's no such thing as bad feedback, right? And that's another important point, even for ourselves. Because we so often talk about good feedback and bad feedback. Feedback is just feedback. What makes it good or bad is the meaning that we put on it. So if we as human beings are open to growth, to learning, to becoming better, feedback is an essential part of that. If we don't get that feedback, we're never going to know what areas we need to improve on, right? So good feedback, bad feedback, there's no such thing. It's got to do with the meaning that we put on it. And I always use the words corrective feedback or developmental feedback like that. So that little phrase again, we call it a you choose approach. So Cillin, I've got some really good feedback that I know you're going to want to hear. And I've also got some corrective feedback that I think would be really useful for you in the future. Which would you like to hear first? Now remember, if the person goes for the corrective feedback, that might get involved, right? We can have a conversation about that. It's always important to go back and give them the good stuff as well. Remember to give them the good stuff as well. You know, we should always be looking for something that they're doing well. That's really, really important. So the second one is the outcome approach. So normally when giving feedback, people might go, they would state the problem, then they'd state the solution, then they'd state the outcome, and then they might check. So, okay, does that make sense? So that list again, problem, solution, outcome, and then a check-in. Okay? Now, the problem with, well, let me give you another, I mean, that's perfectly fine again, but let me give you a different way to think about that. So how I like to phrase it is outcome, potential solution, and then the check-in. Like, okay, does that make sense? So outcome, potential solution, and then check-in. So if you were taking notes or you remember what I said previously, you'll note that the problem side of it was never mentioned. And whenever we give the outcome and the potential solution, people start to get it. They click in real quickly. Oh, I was doing it this way, and that's probably not the best way to get the outcome that we're after. We don't need to mention the problem. And that's really useful when someone is doing something and it's immediate corrective feedback. That's really, really useful for that. So once again, the original one was problem, solution, outcome, check-in. Where we want to go is outcome, potential solution, and check-in. So that's the outcome approach. So we've talked about 3 so far. Just to quickly recap, we've got the feedback sandwich, we've got the you choose approach, and then we've got the outcome approach. Another approach that's quite useful is the ask first approach. So basically, people know that they've either done a sterling job or they could have done a better job here or there. So what I always, if I'm reviewing a document, for example, or if someone does something and I want to give them feedback on it, I'll ask them, so how do you think that went? Or another way of phrasing it, if you had more time to prepare, what would you do differently? And that's a really nice way to segment into a feedback conversation, because it's kind of letting them off the hook just a little bit. You know, if you had more time, knowing that, you know, we were pressured or whatever, what would you do differently? And if they identify the feedback or the area that they could have improved upon, that's fantastic. And I tell them that. So that's fantastic. I think that's a great idea. And now I'm able to build them up because they've identified their own area for improvement. So it doesn't seem like a, you know, you should have done this differently kind of conversation. It's they've identified it, and I'm giving them kudos for identifying that area. And then I might say, and so that's awesome. Do you think you might be able to implement that the next time you write a document like this, or you're giving a presentation, or you're facilitating a meeting, or whatever the thing might be? So to make sure to embed that behavioral change. So that's number 4. Number 5 is a really useful way of giving feedback when there's a repetitive task. We call it the next time approach. So if there's a monthly task that is done, right, on a monthly basis, or if you're writing requirements documents and you're moving on to the next project, or whatever the scenario might be, you're doing a task that you've done here and you have to do it again here. The next time approach works a little bit like this. I would call out 80 or 90% of, in fact, I'd call out 100% of all the good things. So this is where, you know, I look at the delivery or the product or whatever the thing was that they produced or did. And if it's about 80 or 90% there, and I'm happy for the 10 or 20% to slide by, I won't mention the 10 or 20% corrective stuff. I won't mention it. I will give them lavish praise on everything that they did right. Lavish praise. Knowing that, hey, the next time that they do this, I'm going to squirrel away that little area that they could do better. So just before they're about to do the task the next time, I'd remind them about the amazing work that they did, all the different areas of the document or whatever it might be that they were doing. And then I would say, and I just wonder if you could focus more just on this little piece here, because this is what we're looking for. This is the outcome we're after. Do you think you might be able to do that? If you could pay attention to this area here. And they would normally go, yeah, sure, no problem. Because you've built them up to the point where they've done an amazing job, and this little bit, that's easy. Of course they can do it. And because we've given them the feedback just before they're about to do the task, the chances of them implementing it and getting it right are so much higher, so much higher. So that's number 5. That's number 5. The last one, and this is one of my favorites, and this is called the I statement. And the I statement is really useful when we're looking to encourage behavioral change or helping somebody develop particular awareness around a behavior or a habit or something that they do that causes me grief, basically. Now, the I statement is particularly powerful because what it does, ultimately what it does, is it invites the other person into the conversation. It also protects the self-esteem of the other person because it's not a case of you did this wrong or the way you do this annoys me. It's talking about me from my perspective. And that's really useful because when it comes to relationships, if let's say, for example, I'm working in an office and I've got my cup of tea. So let's say, for example, I'm working in an office and I'm making myself a cup of tea. And along comes this other person, right? And we're chatting away. Good morning. How are you doing? What do you got planned for the day? And then they take their tea bag and they drop it in the sink. And I'm thinking to myself, that's so lazy. The bin is just under the sink. Why can't you just put it into the bin? But I don't say anything because I don't want to rock the boat, right? And the person goes off, have a great day. And I'm like, yeah, you have a great day too. Next day, guess what? Making myself a cup of tea, and along comes this guy again, right? And sure enough, we're having a chat, and he takes his tea bag right into the thing. Over time, this is going to build and build. This annoyance is going to build and build and build. It's really going to start to bug me. And if I never mention this to the other person, I might develop a sense of resentment towards that person. Now, when resentment, and that's all a silly example, of course, but when resentment builds in a relationship, it's very, very difficult to come back from that. So when resentment is present in any relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or a working relationship, it's very difficult to come back and to heal that relationship when resentment is present. So what we must do is we must talk about these little things that bug us just a little bit, because it helps the other person know what goes on between us that much better. Now, 9 times out of 10, look, when we're dealing with reasonable people, all we have to do is formulate this I statement in the right way, and the person will go, oh, yeah, no problem. Do you know what? I've never thought about putting my tea bags in the bin, but it's right under the sink. And I'm going, I know. And that's all they might need to know. They might even say, you know what? I never knew this bugged me, or I never knew this bugged you. I'm happy, no problem at all. So that's the power behind an I statement. Now, an I statement contains 3 parts. The way I like to remember it is, well, we all know what a BFF is, right? BFF, best friend forever. Well, this isn't that. It's how I remember it is BEF, BEF. So the B stands for behavior, and that's observable specific behavior. The things that I see the person do or the things that I hear the person say. It's observable and specific. I'm not making stuff up in my mind about what, so if someone were to bang the table or storm out of the room or something like that, I'm not going to talk to them about, hey, you were really angry and aggressive in that meeting, because that's not observably specific. What I can say is when you thumped the table or when you left the meeting room in a hurry, because they're observable specific things that I can talk about. And the person is going to know. The person is going to know what I mean. So it's got to be observably specific, the behavior. The next is the effect that behavior has had on me. Remember, we're making this about me. So the effect that behavior has had on me, how I might have felt uncomfortable or lost for words, for example. And the last piece of this, the I statement, is F, which stands for feeling. So how did I feel about the behavior and the effect? So I might have felt intimidated or uncomfortable or whatever it might be. Now, from teaching this over and over and over, I find the best way to learn how to do an I statement is to write that down, those three component parts. So I would write down the behavior that I observed, I would write down the effect that that behavior has had on me, and I'd write down the feeling that I feel about that behavior and that effect. So for example, if I'm flatting, for example, and with my roommate, we have an agreement about, on these particular days, they do the dishes, on these days, I do the dishes. And I come home from work, and of course the dishes aren't done, and there's my roommate, feet up, watching Netflix or something like that. And I want to use the bench to prepare my dinner or whatever it might be, and I feel, I have to clean up the dishes in order to use the bench, and I'm not happy with the extra work, right? So an I statement might sound like, when you don't do the dishes you've arranged, I end up needing to do them in order to use the bench, and I dislike the extra work, right? So there's the behavior, there's the effect, and then there's the feeling. Now we can improve that a little bit, because I use the word you. When you don't use, or when you don't clean the dishes as you've arranged, that personalizes it just a little bit. And we want to remove the personalization as much as possible. So what we can do is we can use passive voice. So passive voice might sound something along the lines of, when the dishes aren't done as we've arranged to do. So again, the person is going to get the message, but it's going to be less personalized, less likely to invoke that fight or flight response, that emotional reaction. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So that's the sixth one. So that's an I statement. And having a range of ways of delivery is the person, basically it feels like a conversation, right? We don't want it to be predictable or formulaic or anything like that. So having a lot of different ways of delivering it, a lot of tools for giving feedback is much, much more powerful. And the person is much more likely to accept it when they feel like rather than feel like a technique is being used, right? So then there's the delivery side of it. Now, the delivery side of it, there's a couple of things that you need to do. First thing, we've talked about it already. There's owning your own state. Where are you at? What's your mood like? So once you feel comfortable and calm and ready to go, then there's the delivery of it. And you can use one of the 6 ways that we've talked about, or any other way that you've come across before, any other effective way. It doesn't really matter, as long as the feedback approach is conducive to getting the behavioral change. And it's the right choice for the situation at hand. Now, when I give the feedback, again, 9 times out of 10, the person is likely to comment or respond. That's perfect. We want them to come into the conversation. We want to understand their point of view. If they don't say anything and they just go quiet, I'll ask. I'll say something along the lines of, so I'm really keen to get your thoughts on, what I've just shared. Or I might even use the old, and look, I know no matter how thinly you slice something, there's always 2 sides to the story, and I'm really keen to hear yours. So invite them into the conversation. When no matter what they say, we just understand and empathize. We understand and we empathize. We listen. Now, it doesn't mean that we're agreeing with them, but we want to show them that we have heard where they're coming from. And the best way of doing that is paraphrasing. And that's a whole nother seminar, the paraphrasing side of it. But we want to reflect back what they've heard to what they've said, to demonstrate that we've truly heard them. Now, again, just because they've got a different viewpoint doesn't mean that we have to agree. What we do have to agree on is the way forward. So we brainstorm. So what are your thoughts on how we move forward with this? So we brainstorm some ideas, and then once we have something that we can work with, we'd look to inspire them. Right? We want to pick them up again. We want to brush them off. We want to send them back out there to do the good work that they do. So we want to talk about, some of the good stuff that they're doing. And you might just say, hey, look, Cillin, this is just a moment in time here. Or, And as far as I'm concerned, we've had the conversation, we've got a plan moving forward. Hey, let's just execute that plan and let's get back out there. You know, we want them to hear the feedback, but we don't want to crush them. We want to see that behavioral change. So folks, that's just a very quick, me just everything I can possibly think about for feedback. And I know a lot of the stuff when giving feedback is quite contextual. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to shout them out.
Cillin, we have 2 questions here. Fashion says, can you provide an example of the outcome approach, please?
An example of the outcome approach. Yeah. Let me have a quick think. So say, for example, someone is doing a brief, a document, and they really fill in a lot of detail, say in the executive summary, and it's too long. So an executive would look at it and go, "Oh, too wordy, too much information there. That should be at the back of the document." So how someone might approach that would be, hey, look, this is too wordy, there's too much information. Just reduce it, condense it right on down, make sure you only get the key points, because what we're looking for, this is the outcome, right? The outcome we're after is that an executive can glance through it and make a decision really quickly. Does that make sense? Is that okay? So that's the first part of it. So how we might change that or do it differently is we might say, hey, look, the executive summary is useful for executives to be able to quickly glance at the information and make a decision. So can I propose that we take out the detail and just focus on those key points? Is that okay? Would that work? That might be an example of the outcome approach. Cool. Any other questions?
Let me just check with Thashin. Do you want to continue on that vein, or you comfortable with what Cillin just said?
Thanks, Cillin. I'm happy with that response. It makes a lot of sense.
Thanks,
Okay, brilliant. The next one is from M. Bice, who says, how do we respond to people we have given feedback to, but they become defensive about it or did not take it well?
That's a good question, and it's a common occurrence, right? So there's only so much that is in your control. How a person receives that feedback is outside of our control. What we can do is prepare enough so that we deliver it gently. But again, that message, it needs to get through. We don't want to soften the message so much that it just doesn't make sense. So there's a couple of reasons why a person might get defensive about particular feedback. One is they might feel it clashes with their identity or their sense of self. So for example, personal example, when I've given feedback to a particular woman in the past, she's a lovely woman, heart of gold, do anything for anybody. But she talked and talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. And you get my idea, right? And to the point where it was disrupting people's work, people would be avoiding her. Some of my team asked to be moved out of the same pod area as she was in because they just couldn't get any work done. And no one had given her feedback over the years. And so I had to give her this feedback, and I prepared as much as I possibly could, and I delivered it as gently as I could, and it crushed her. She said, there were tears, and she said, look, but communication is part of who I am. And of course, that's not, because communication is just a behavior, it's just a skill. It has nothing to do with our identity. But she linked, that to her identity, and it absolutely crushed her. And in those instances, all you can do is just empathize and listen and paraphrase and reflect back and truly, truly show the person that you understand However, we need to make these changes. So it's a balance of those two things. The other thing to be mindful of when giving feedback and why a person might get defensive is it might come down to your relationship with that person. So if we've got a low trust relationship and I give you feedback on something and it's perfectly good feedback and it's very valid, and the person receives that feedback, they're not hearing it with the intention in which it was meant. It's getting blurred or filtered through the relationship with you, right? So it becomes about your relationship and not the feedback. So the person might push back on that. So making sure that your relationship with your teams is as good as it can be, so that when you give feedback, the person receives it with the intention in which it is delivered. That Cillin is telling me this because it's only going to improve my delivery or improve my performance, or it's for the good of the team, or whatever it might be. But if they do get defensive, just listen, reflect back, try to understand. Don't try to convince them. Let them get the emotion out, hear what they have to say, and then ask them, so what are your thoughts on how we can move forward from this? Now, another type of defensive approach is, for example, if you're a leader of leaders, right, and you need to give feedback to an indirect report, so you skip a level right down, you may not be exposed to that behavior yourself. So you're hearing it second or third hand. If someone were to push back on me when I give them this feedback and they push back hard, I'll say, look, I appreciate you sharing that, blah, blah, blah. No matter how thin you slice it, so I get it, da, 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 da. What's really important to recognize, though, is that even if this feedback isn't warranted, there's a perception that this needs to be changed. And that makes it easier to change the behavior for the person. Because in a way, I'm kind of saying, hey, you know what, you could be right, but there's a perception. And we need to change that perception. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, yeah. And the interesting thing, of course, is when we close the gap on the perception of the feedback, we also close the gap on the actual feedback side of things. So that might be another useful approach of dealing with that defensive pushback. Any other thoughts or questions, folks?
I just want to see if Bias actually has any follow-up responses to what you just said.
Yep, please.
Good morning, everyone. I actually do not, but I kind of wish that I had this training about a week ago before I had given feedback to my employee, where she became, the feedback that we were giving her was with regards to her performance, where literally a week before that she was exceeding, then the week thereafter she wasn't. But then we came to the conclusion that it was more her needing to handle a personal matter than it being a work matter, because her personal life kind of affected her work performance. And then she said after the feedback that we had given her, she needed to just step away for a moment and just take a breather. And then this was actually on a Friday. But then the Monday, I kind of just followed up with her to check in with her to see how she was doing. And she was back to where she needed to be. But thank you.
Well done. Well done. And that's a really good point, Boys. So when someone is performing really, really well, and then all of a sudden that changes, it could be a clue that something might be going on in their personal life. And so, there's another technique that I haven't shared with you, and I don't even have a name for it, but how it tends to work is if, say, for example, there's a person and they're performing at a high level in the past, and all of a sudden they're starting to come in late, they're being snappy with their work colleagues, their performance is dropping a little bit. So I start to notice these small behavioral changes. I'll sit them down and I'll say, hey, look, I just wanted to share with you some things that I've noticed. and I'll take a nice deep breath, and I'll say, there are 3 things I want to talk to you about. So the 3 things sets them up that I'm going to tell them 3 things, and I'm not going to stop until I'm finished with those 3 things. So there's 3 things. Firstly, and I'll say, you know, I noticed that your timekeeping has slipped over the last little while. Secondly, that's where I take a deep breath. I don't want them to jump in. Secondly, I noticed that, you know, just recently when your colleagues have asked you a question, they've been snapped at. And again, that's passive language, not you have snapped at them, but they've been snapped at. The person will get it. And lastly, the third point is, I noticed that the quality of your work has started to slip. And then I will say, and what I want to know is, what underlies all of that? Now, in that instance, it gives them the opportunity to share that, hey, I've got something going on outside. And then we can wrap our arms around them and give them as much support as we possibly can to help them through that tough time. If they push back and go, no, nothing, that's cool. I just wanted to bring these things to your attention. And then offer, you know, if there's anything, you know that we're here to support you, blah, blah, blah. But again, pick them up, move them on. Let them go back out there and do their good work. Now, if the behaviors continue, then I'll bring them back in a week or 2 later, and I'll say, look, a couple of weeks ago, we sat down and we had a conversation about this. I'm still noticing these changes. Can I just check? Are you sure there's nothing going on that we can't help with? And if they say no, blah, 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 well, then I get a little bit more, you know, direct about, I want to see some changes. I want to see some behavioral changes around these particular areas. Or we'd have a more direct conversation about the feedback. Sometimes what will tend to happen is the person will go, oh, well, I've just been late because of the traffic. And I go, but I'm not interested in debating these individual things. I'm recognizing a pattern, and I want to discuss what's underlying that pattern. So don't allow them to go into those individual things. That's not what it's about. It's likely there's an underlying root cause.
Cool. Lesejo asks, how often should feedback be provided?
Another great question. So my preference is to create a culture of feedback in my team or in my organization. It's a culture of feedback. So what I mean by that is I want my team to expect feedback every time we have a one-on-one, or at least monthly. So how I do this, and this is a real simple way of setting it up. I'm giving you all my stuff, folks. So I hope you're jotting this down. So the way I get feedback is in three simple questions. The first one is I will ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is Cillin doing, right? And the person might go, yeah, 7. I'd say he's doing about a 7. I say, great, okay, terrific. So what's he doing to earn a 7? And then they'll tell me the good things, you know, and I say, okay, fantastic, fantastic. And you probably guessed the next question, right? So what does he need to be doing in order to get a 10? And that's that corrective piece. And I'm jotting that down, right? And then I'd sit down with the team, and there's work that needs to be done to get the team into a good space to receive the feedback and to take it and own it. So don't just jump into this, you know, this thing. You got to build a team. You got to create an environment of trust. You've got to ensure that they're committed to a particular vision. And we've got a clear set of values about how we're going to work together. And then we can ask the question when we've got all that in place, you know, so how are we going to know that we're doing the good work that we set out to do? And they will tell you, well, we should be getting more feedback. And I'm like, awesome, fantastic. And then a couple of weeks later, I'll introduce this model. I'll say, hey, look, I've been thinking about that idea that you presented about getting more feedback. And what I do is I take those 3 questions, I put them in a very simple email to people that they're working with. And I wouldn't ask the same person every month. I would ask different people, and just one person at a time. And I'd get that feedback. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how is X doing? Okay, that's great. What does he or she do to deserve that 7? Capture the good stuff. And if it's, you know, what's the difference? What do they need to be doing? And I'd share that feedback. And it's just a common thing that they expect every time we sit down, or every other time that we sit down, their feedback coming their way. Now, here's the thing. Once we start it, it's got to be consistent. And that's on you, the leader. It's got to be consistent. Otherwise, it'll fall away and you won't create that culture or environment of feedback.
Brilliant. Lesejo, are you happy? Do you have a follow-up?
I'm happy, Tsepo. Thank you so much. I think the reason why I asked the question, is that in most organizations, we wait for the time where we look at our KPIs, and this is once in a year that we are provided feedback or we receive feedback. So I think it's that culture that also needs to be within a team and within the entire organization, that feedback is given frequently. Thanks.
Right.
Absolutely agree. Thanks, Seho.
Yeah, I think we ran out of time and questions. Ruth Stead just said this very good comment. These points are also useful in how to have a constructive argument as well. Do you want to maybe just expand on that? What is a constructive argument, Ruth?
Yeah, well, feedback is part of having that constructive argument, as Cillin was saying about the tea bags or cleaning up in the house that you're sharing, rather than you always throw the tea bags in the sink.
Right.
It's part of discussion. It's part of argument, rather than, as you were saying, Cillin, about it just bottling it up and getting so angry with the guy that you now resenting them. Yeah, it's not just in a workspace. It's wherever you are. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah. The rest is just compliments on what you shared from Sean as well as Theshan. Valuable techniques, Cillin. I've noted them down and will definitely use some of this with my team. Really appreciate the techniques you have given us this morning, your evening. So I think, folks, we at 8:28. This is officially Curtain Call. I'm really, really very thankful for the time that you've given us and the techniques and the secrets. I think some of them were not scripted. It was like some of your back pocket kind of techniques that you use, which we really, really appreciate, Cillin. And thank you so much for starting a new culture. I'm thinking now we need to have more coffee time kind of sessions, because usually we have this in the evening when people are just trying to relax at home and just take one more thing before they go to bed. So I think this was really, really helpful. And I don't think there was a better guy to start this off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.